Yerushalayim, warning people about things, and it turned out that he was the only one in the country who knew what was going on. The whole country was wrong, and he was right. His name was Yirmiyahu. And because they didn't listen to him, there was a churban. So we have a precedent in history where one kohen can be right, and the whole country can be wrong. This kohen, Baruch Hashem, has a lot of people who are supporting him. Tonight I just like to point out, it's an odd thing that Rabbi Meir Kehane has become a controversial figure even in the Orthodox world. So many Frumme Yidden who are sort of frightened of him. And it struck me this week, in fact, Charlie, give me my Jewish press, I brought it there especially. It struck me that here we are finishing 40 years of a Medinas Yisrael, in which we've only had one single prime minister who ever used the phrase Baruch Hashem. You know who that was? Menachem Begin. The only one who ever used the name of Hashem, ever. The only one who knew that there's such a thing called Shabbos. And people have seemed to have lived more or less comfortably with this for 40 years. The Orthodox world is not up in arms. That secularists, and several of them out-and-out atheists, who never said the word God, ever, were running the government, undisturbed. And then when they hear that a rabbi who believes in Shabbos and Kashrus and Paras HaMishpacha and practices it, might, the dreams of becoming prime minister, they're scared and they're shaking in their pants. Hey, catastrophe for the Medina. So what are they saying? They're saying that God helps the Medina when secularists run it, but if a Frum Yid takes over, who knows what God will decide? Very, very strange. Or are they really saying deep in their hearts that they have no confidence that God's running the Medina? They think America is. And you need politicians to warm up America. Without America, the state won't live. Like God is not running the show anymore. And that's the Frum Yid. Strange. This week's Jewish press front page, Perez is accused of slandering the religious settlers and is quoted as having been at a meeting in which he said, "The West Bank settlers are a group of skull-cap wearers with beards and guns whose appearance arouses ridicule." That's Perez, former prime minister. The fellows who sit in the yeshiva, they ridicule them, they say, "Ha, fruma," and they refuse to fight. These are the fellows who have a beard and a gun and a yarmulke, and they're ridiculous too. Because this is a man who doesn't believe in anybody who's religious, period. These are the leaders that we've lived with, and they're frightened to death that a Frumme Yid will become prime minister. So if you listen to the Frumme Yid, you begin to realize there's nothing to be afraid of. Like I carried there for 40 years, we're looking for this kind of leadership. I'm proud to present my friend, Rabbi Meir Kehane.
Just about two and a half weeks ago, I was at the funeral of a young girl that was killed in Pharakowy. And the tragedy is that I doubt if there are 3 people in this room who recall that 1 year earlier, almost to the month, 1 year before that, another funeral took place in the same settlement. A Jewish youngster named Rami Chava. And because Jewish lives have become so really cheap, so many deaths, we forget the death of even a child a year ago. And I think that the story of Rami Chava has to be remembered because there's a tendency, even among Orthodox Jews, to talk about coexistence between Jews and Arabs. I knew the Chava family well. The Chava family did not come from villas, wealthy areas. They came from the slums, Tel Aviv, Hatikva. And 6 years ago, the Chava family moved from Hatikva, Tel Aviv, to the Shomron. so that their little child, Rami, who at that time was just about 2, would live clear air, fresh air. Exactly a year ago, they found Rami Chava's body 100 meters from his home. He was 8 years old. The person who found the body in the cave told me that the Arabs had hammered away at the child's face so that there was no face left. They couldn't identify him by the face. And when I came to the Shiva, the home, the mother stood up. You can imagine the feelings of a mother who has just lost a child of 8 under the circumstances. She stood up and shouted at me, "Tavtiach li nikama," promise me revenge. That's a Jewish mother. Tavtiach li nikama, promise me revenge. There are 2 lessons that I want every Jew to learn from this. 1, know who the Arabs are. How easy it is to sit in America, talk about compromising with them, giving up this and giving up that. The people who took an 8-year-old child and pounded away at his face and killed him. These are Arabs who, if tomorrow, if they could, would do to us what they did to us 60 years ago and 50 years ago. What are we talking about as if the problem has now arisen? It's the occupied lands. In the 1920s, the Arabs massacred hundreds of Jews in Eretz Israel. In one day, in Hebron in 1929, they killed 67 Jews. One day. It was bothering the Arabs then. What was troubling the Arabs in 1929, the occupied lands in 1967? Between 1936 and 1938, 510 Jewish men, women, and children were massacred in Eretz Israel. 510 Jewish men and children. In the middle 30s, what do they want then? They don't want the West Bank. They want all of Eretz Israel, and they want to massacre Jews. And the cry that we hear now, Ittach Yehu, slaughter the Jew, is a cry that we heard in the 1920s and 1930s. And they slaughtered Jews then, when they had the power to. And they dream of doing that again. That's the first lesson. The second lesson is, we have got to put an end to the un-Jewish thinking which has permeated Jews. A mother rises and shouts, "Tavtiach li nikama," promise me vengeance. And all the papers say vengeance is a non-Jewish concept. Just this past week, when the death sentence was handed down on this Nazi, immediately, even those who were for the death sentence went into an entire pilpul. It's not vengeance. We don't want vengeance. We just want justice done. Vengeance is a positive quality. And vengeance is a Torah concept. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu is known as Kel Nikamot. The Lord's a God of vengeance. And the Gemara asks, is vengeance then a good thing? The Gemara, brachas. And it answers, yes, in its proper time, it is a good thing. Because vengeance is proof that the Kodesh Baruch Hu exists. If the wicked can do wicked things and nothing happens to them, then that is a sign that chas v'shalom, there is no justice in the world, and above all, there is no judge in the world. David HaMelech writes, Tehillim, Perek Nun Chet, Yismach Tzadik, Ki Chazal Hakam, the righteous shall rejoice because he sees vengeance. Pa'amar Yirchatz B'dam HaRasha, he washes his feet in the blood of the wicked. David HaMelech wrote that. More people to say vengeance is not right. If vengeance is not right, then what we do is we hold in contempt the victim. People who speak of to forgive. Who are you to forgive something which was done to someone else? Who are you to forgive Germans for what they did to other Jews? Who are you to forgive Arabs for having murdered an 8-year-old child who was not yours? It's important that we hear a few Jewish concepts, which tragically, in our galut, which has such an influence on us, that without our even knowing the gentilized concepts of galut influence us, so that we begin to, so that even though we may keep rituals, but the concepts of Judaism have become more. Ki teitzei lemilchama al oidecha. Pasuk in the Torah. When one goes out to war against his enemies, and the rabbis ask in the Medrash, in Tanchum, why does it have to say al oidecha, on your enemies? Obviously, people go to war only against enemies. It isn't necessary to mention enemies. And the Tanchuma says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty said, Bo alehem koivim, no, go against them as enemies. Kishem sheinam, merachamim alechem, just as they will not have mercy upon you, kach atem lo terachamu alehem. Don't have mercy upon them. That's Judaism. Behaving with Arabs, we have to be better than they. You're not better. We may be better, but not better. We mean better. What? Why is it better? To have mercy upon people who, because of our mercy, will someday murder Jews. This is better? This is morality? This is ethics? Every Jew who opposed me for the last 20 years when I said, throw the Arabs out, is a silent partner in the murder of every Jew who has been murdered by those same Arabs since. That's the tragedy. The rabbis tell us, in the Medrash, on the same pasuk, when one goes out to his enemies, Mashal lima hadavar domeh. What is it likened to? And they answer, Yehoed, to a shepherd who went out in the forest to tend his sheep. A shepherd, obviously Jewish, as you'll see soon. Matzah gur echad zeh. He found a little baby wolf. He had pity on it. The Jews have pity on anything weak, even wolves. He had pity on it. Vayam eniko min ha'izim. And so he nursed it with his goats. Doesn't have with this little wolf. He nursed it, and he got stronger and bigger. Amar lo ba'al melachto, his employer said to him, what's this? He said, kill it, kill it. Sheloi tehei takala latzon. Because otherwise it will be a stumbling block onto our sheep. He will kill the sheep. Little wounds become big wounds. Lo shamai. Even listeners, after all, a Jewish heart. After all, a Jewish heart. Kivan shegadal, when it got bigger, ra'ah keves la'agov. He saw a sheep and killed it. Hidiv achlo. A goat and ate it. Amar lo, so his employer said to him, lo amarti lecha, lo tachos alav, didn't I tell you not to pity on it? Kach amar lehem Moshe, thus did Moses say unto the Jews, im atem chasim alehem, if you have pity on them, vaya asher, totiru mehem, those that you will leave from them, they will be l'sikim beinechem, as thorns in your eyes. Yitzarutchem al haaretz, and they will persecute you in the land. There is no coexistence with the Arabs. One who speaks of Jewish-Arab coexistence will have to first prove to me that there is coexistence between Arabs. It is a pleasure to see how Arabs live together in Beirut. It is a pleasure. The coexistence there is profound. Sunni and Shiites and Druze and Christians and Hezbollah, each one massacres the other one daily. But of course we will live with them together because we have so much in common. One doesn't coexist with a cancer. They are a cancer in our midst. And a cancer that is spreading. It's about time that people said it, and don't be afraid to say it. Because kol hamrachem ala avzar sotol liot avzar ala rahman. One who has pity upon the cruel, the rabbis tell us, who someday be cruel onto the pitiful and the merciful. The Arabs inside Israel hate Israel. Why is that a surprising thing? Why must I have benighted Jews say, but aren't there any good Arabs? What an insane question. Of course there are good Arabs. They're all good Arabs. Every one of them is a good Arab. The problem with the questioner is he doesn't know what a good Arab is. To him, in his Rudyard Kipling kind of Jewishness, he thinks a good Arab is an Arab who will accept the fact that what he thinks is Palestine is really Israel, and like some plantation slave will say, yes, master, yes, master. See, that's a good Arab. Let me tell you what a good Arab is. A good Arab is like a good Jew. What's a good Jew? A good Jew is someone who says, the land belongs to me. It's a Jewish state. That's a good Jew. That's a good Arab too. A good Arab is one who says, it's my country, it's Palestine. Are there any good Arabs? Of course. They're all good Arabs. Every single one of them. That's the problem. The contempt that Jewish liberals have for Arabs is only exceeded perhaps by the contempt that they have for blacks. They believe that you can buy somebody with money. If only we will raise the Arab living standards up, then they'll be good Arabs. What an unbelievable, contemptuous concept for human beings. The problem is that the Arabs don't have indoor toilets. This is the problem. Electricity. If only we would educate. Jews have always been great on education. If we only educate the blacks, then they'll be good. Oh boy. Yes. if only we would educate the Arabs, then the most educated Arabs in Israel are the most dangerous Arabs. The Arabs at Hebrew University are the most dangerous Arabs in Israel. The revolution will not come from some falach, from some agricultural farmer, an illiterate. Revolutions don't come from the numb and the dumb. Revolutions come from the intellectuals. And we, in our benighted insanity, have made them educated. I remember 2 years ago when Shimon Peres was, at that time, still the prime minister. So there was a debate in Knesset about chinuch. And he got up and he literally glowed. It was like Moses coming down from Mount. He just was glowing. As he said, 40 years ago, at that time, probably less, 8 years ago, he said, the Arabs of this country were illiterate. Today, there are 4,000 Arab students studying in the universities of Israel. And he stood there glowing. And I thought to myself, either he's insane or I'm insane, but one of us must be insane. But this, you glow? The future leaders of the PLO will come out of Hebrew University, and Tel Aviv University, and Haifa University, and through all the others here, Bar-Ilan, which has, thank God, 250 Arab students. May they increase if they will. But an insanity. You think that by making them educated, they will love Jews? Jews have an internal sickness, a need to be loved. That's why that's why only among the Jewish people could there be a phenomenon that Jesse Jackson's national chairman is a Jew. No other normal people would ever have such a thing. Can you imagine the national chairman of some Ku Klux Klan being a black? Blacks have too much self-respect. The problem of Arabs in Israel is the fact that they believe that the country belongs to them. Why is that so difficult to understand? They believe the country is theirs. They believe that the Jews are thieves. That's the problem. What are you going to do to them? Say, we know that you believe that we are thieves, so take half of what we stole. What has happened to that vaunted Jewish mind, the Yiddish cult? The pity is not that we don't know the truth. The pity is that we don't want to know the truth because it is too painful. In the Torah, right before the Makat Arbeh, the locust plague, the 8th plague, the Torah tells us that Pharaoh's servants come to him and they say to him, Haterem teda ki avda Mitzrayim, which literally means, don't you yet know that Egypt is lost? But the Ibn Ezra, in a great, a deep concept, says, Haterem ratzita ladat ki avda Mitzrayim. Don't you yet want to know that Egypt is lost? That's the truth. After 7 plagues, Pharaoh knew the truth. The problem was he didn't want to admit the truth because it was too painful to him. And that has been the Jewish curse, for 3,000 years. We don't want to see it. We don't want the truth. It's too painful. We look away. If I look away, maybe it will go away. It is not going away. It is getting worse. Today, people tell me, if only in 1967 we would have thrown the Arabs out. But I remember 1967, the reason why they didn't throw the Arabs out in 67 was because people then said the same thing they say now. It's impossible. What will the world say? So we didn't. And now instead of having 500,000 Arabs, we have 1.3 million Arabs there. And what will be in 10 years? 10 years, I'll say, if we had thrown the Arabs out in 1980, that would have been a different story. The Arabs of Israel pose a threat to us not because of their stones, not because of their Molotov cocktails. The Arabs of Israel pose a threat to us because of their population. They have babies and babies and babies and babies, and we pay them for every baby, from Bituach Leumi, national insurance. There was an article in the paper about 3 or 4 months ago about an Arab, a Bedouin, an Israeli citizen, thank God, from the Bedouin settlement of Rab in the Negev, a father of 48 children, 6 wives, 48 children, Ken Yehu, and believe me, they will. He hasn't stopped. He's still young enough. Every month he goes to Beersheba, to the Dora, to the post office. Every month at the post office he gets 48 checks from a people that is an Am Naval Velo Chacham, an abnormal people. What normal people subsidizes its own suicide. The Galil today, the Galilee today has a majority of Arabs. The Jews in northern Israel today are a minority in their own country. I was in Akko just Sunday. We have rallies every night. We have rallies, 2 rallies a night since I'm barred from television and radio in Israel. Of course, it's nice living in a democracy. So we have 2 rallies a night. Akko is a city, if you go there not as a tourist to look at the quaint old city. Akko is a city which today is 1/3 Arab. Jews are afraid to go at night into the old city of Akko. They're afraid. Just as Jews are afraid today to go into the old city, Yerushalayim, through Sha'ar Shechem, the Master's Gate. Jews are afraid. For 2,000 years we had a dream. The Jew, whether he was in Morocco, or in Yemen, or in Poland, the Jew prayed 3 times daily for 2,000 years that someday we too would have a state. And we would leave the fear and the shiflut, the agony and so on. Fear. We will leave the fear of the exile and come to our country and stand straight and tall and proud and free, never again to be afraid. Our children could walk the streets freely and so on, day and night. We have a state today. It's a dream. It's becoming a nightmare. Jews are afraid to stay in their own country. When I founded JDL here, of course, Jews of Brooklyn and other Rockfords and the South Bronx were afraid. I understood that. That's all is what can one do. I came to Israel and I found Brooklyn. What a chilul Hashem! What a desecration! We're afraid that Jewish cars are stoned, not only in Gaza, on the Kvish HaChov, on the coastal highway from Haifa to Tel Aviv. Every day Jewish cars are stoned there. Every day. In Wadi Ara, between Hadera, Afula, Jews no longer use Kvish Wadi Ara. They use a parallel Kvish. It's a half hour longer, but it's safe. This is Israel. This is Israel. the dream? This is what we dreamed of? Arabs aren't afraid. Arabs walk freely and safely anywhere. Day, night, anywhere. You go on a Jewish bus. Every Jewish bus in Israel has a little sign which reads, beware of objects that's suspicious. And if someone sees such an object, there's immediate panic. They stop the bus, they flee the bus, the police come, the bomb squad comes, they paralyze the area for 2 hours. Riding with me once in Hebron in an Arab bus. It's a pleasure, a pleasure. First of all, there's no sign. Why should they have a sign? Never in 40 years has there been a suspicious object on an Arab bus. So they ride quietly, calmly. Who is the conqueror and who is the conquered? Who's the ruler and who's the ruled? What's happening here? So Jews are afraid today. If a child comes home late, if a child is late by half an hour, there's fear. What happened to him? April, will I? Chas v'shalom, mir dayama. It's Israel. Israel. The Israeli army. Yes. It's the jewel in the crown. The Israeli army defeated countries, defeated armies. You can't put down riots by women and children. Of course it could, if they would let it. But the soldiers are hobbled by insane orders. I served in the army. I know what the insane orders are. They can curse you, spit at you, throw rocks at you. You can't do anything. And so what do you think this does to the Arabs? It gives them an enormous self-confidence. They are no longer afraid of soldiers. They are not afraid today. And it is only fear which has kept these animals away. And so they come to hate in their eyes. Hate in their eyes. And they're not afraid. Insane orders. If your life is threatened, you have to first shoot in the air. Your life is threatened, you have to first shoot in the air. And then you have the legs. If you must shoot in the air, at least in the lungs. The rabbis put it well. Haba lo gechashtem lo go. If one comes to slay you, slay him first. That is Judaism. And not this nonsense fed to us by Jewish leaders, swindlers and swindlers of all kinds. Speaking in the name of a Judaism which is a perverted thing, a corrupted thing, a counterfeited thing. This is the commandment. And thou shalt live by them and not die by them. And there was a commandment to live, to live. I don't know what will be in 10 years if we continue in this way. I don't know what will be in 10 years. I do know that if we continue in this way, in 2 years, on television, you'll be seeing the same scenes that you see now from Gaza taking place in the Galilee. You see Jewish soldiers shooting at Arabs in the Galilee. But this time you see Arabs shooting back because the Galilee is filled with Arabs who have weapons. And the Israeli Arab is a chasuf, he's brazen, he's a sabra, speaks Hebrew well, isn't afraid, has no complexes, a dangerous person, a dangerous person. Today, the Galilee has a majority of Arabs. Wadi Arab, the Mishulas, the triangle, which is that chunk of Israel, right behind the coast, right behind such cities as Petah Tikva, and Farsab, and Ra'anana, and Herzliya, and others, with Arab towns such as Taiba, Tira, Umm-al-Fakhr, Bakka, Kafakasa. That area, right behind the Israeli coastline, just 5-6 kilometers back, is solidly Arab. It is a solid Arab area. If God forbid there is a war, one full Israeli army will have to stay inside Israel to protect the Jews from the Arabs inside the country. And they're growing and growing and growing. They have babies and Jews have abortions. 30,000 a year, officially. 30,000 babies a year killed. Arabs don't have abortion because it isn't allowed under Islam. Not that it's allowed under Judaism. It doesn't matter. On the other hand, there is no aliyah. When people tell me, people on the right, well, there will be an aliyah. An aliyah. What aliyah? What aliyah? No one is coming to live today in Israel, except some nebuch, some poor Russians there, and Ethiopians. Who is coming from the west? In South Africa, where they're sitting on a volcano. Those that do leave, almost all go to Australia. Who is coming here? On the contrary, who is coming? I mean, there's no one. Who is coming here to America? Israelis. Kabbalah tragedy, a tragedy. This is Zionism. Last year there was a deficit of 18,000 more people left Israel than came in 1 year. We face a tragedy of demography and democracy. And it is vital that we decide and we choose, and not with this Rahmanut shel Tipshim, the mercy of fools that has somehow grabbed us and seized us and captured us. Rahmanut shel Tipshim, mercy of fools. We can't throw the Arabs out. That isn't right. But it isn't right. Not only is it right, it is incumbent upon us. It is a commandment. It is halakha. And that's what troubles me. That rabbis who know it is halakha will not come out and say so openly because of a fear. Why don't you just throw him out? Leave, quiet. This isn't the Knesset. Shalom, goodbye. Shalom, Hashem. The incredible kind of, not one rabbi will debate me, not one other rabbi except in this synagogue will let me speak and give a shiur on this. Instead, an ignoramus gets up and shouts. I want a debate on halakha on this, a debate on halakha. And let's hear what it is really. So rabbis tell us, Torah tells us, in Parshat Shoftim, that when one goes to war, ki teitzei lemilchama, and in the Sifri, it immediately says, in Mechemet Rishut, HaKatuv Medaber. The verse is speaking about a voluntary war, not only a war against the Canaanite nation, Amalek, mitzvah, but a milchemet reshut, meaning any war against any enemy. That's what it says. So without context, in any war, when we go to war, we have to first give them an opportunity for peace. And if they choose peace, vayu lecha emas va'avaducha, and they shall. This is the origin of the concept of tribute and service. The non-Jew wishes to live in Eretz Israel must accept misim ve'avdut. That is halakha. Tribute and service. He is not a citizen. He doesn't sit in the Knesset to vote on who is a Jew. And I think it's an important thing for us to finally realize and know and see exactly what the halakha is. I want to bring down the Rambam for you, who will tell you exactly what misim and avdut are. Misim, of course, taxation. Avdut, this is the Rambam in Yechot Melachim, very vav halakha. And I purposely bring down the Rambam because he is, of course, a progressive thinker. He was a doctor. The avdut sheikablu, and the servitude that they shall accept, sheyu nivzim v'shfelim lemata, they shall be in contempt and low. V'lo yarimu rosh klal b'Yisrael, they shall never lift their head up in Israel. Ela yu pushim tachat yadam, they shall be captured under them. V'lo yitmanu al Yisrael l'shum davar l'olam, and they shall never be appointed over Jews at any time, in anything. That's halakha, and the halakha is that neither a king, nor a dayan, nor a sar, even mishe mimuneh ala mayim, the Gemara says, even a pakid, a clerk in the area, Jerusalem, is not allowed to be a non-Jew. Now you may not be happy with this. That's your problem. It's not my problem. But it's certainly his problem. Either he doesn't know this, which is probably true, or worse, he does know this. He doesn't have the courage to say, this too is halakha. In Judaism, halakha is not limited to the kitchen or the bedroom. Halakha is a way of life. Hilchot Shabbat and Hilchot Melachim. There are laws of the Shabbat and the laws of government, and there are laws of Arabs. Arabs aren't just Arabs. There are laws concerning Arabs. What is the status of an Arab, of a non-Jew? What is the status? And if we accept Torah, we accept all of Torah and not part of Torah. And the question is not to me, why don't other rabbis say it? This question has to be put to the other rabbi. It has to be put to them and ask why. Yilmedenu Rabbeinu, teach us what? Teach us. Teach us. Teach us what is wrong with what Kehnä says in terms of halakha. What is wrong in terms of halakha? And in terms of politics. I'm not a politician. I'm a rabbi who unfortunately has to use politics because it's the only way to get the kind of power necessary to save Israel not only from Arabs but from Jews. If we don't throw the Arabs out, they will throw us out, those of us who are left alive. That's for sure. Democracy is incompatible with the Jewish state. You may not be happy with that state, but I haven't come here to make people happy. I've come here to make people think. You want democracy? Then you have to play the game all the way. Then the Arabs have a right to sit peacefully. and non-violently and quietly and have enough babies and make love, not war. And if they do that nightly, how many Arabs will sit in the Knesset? We now have 7 Arabs in the Knesset. After this election, 10 for sure. For sure. What happens in 5 years, 10 years, when 30 Arabs sit there? A coalition government with the left? And that's your government. And what happens in 20 years when they are the majority? They can vote Israel out of existence. They simply vote them out of existence. We sit and play games with democracy. You want democracy? Then forget Zionism. Forget a Jewish state. You want a Jewish state? Forget democracy. Not for Israel. That's the choice. And I've spoken for this, like this, for 17 years in Israel. Today there is a change taking place. Thank God. Thank God. Thank so fine. Not that Jews have gotten smarter. It's that they've gotten rocks. You got a rock thrown at you. Suddenly, it's amazing how yesterday's liberal becomes normal. You got a rock thrown at you. A Molotov cocktail thrown at you. You see Arabs with burning hate, and you suddenly realize, my God, what they would do to me if they could. This year there's an election. Finally, there must be an election. They have no choice. If they had, believe me, they would push it off. Asa Weitzman was on radio last Thursday, and he said, he said, to my sorrow, Kehonn will get 8 seats in the next election. Of course, as usual, Weitzman's wrong. We'll get more. We are captives of the news media. So we assume that things we don't see aren't happening. We don't hear about someone, he doesn't exist. But he does. He does. And the fact that there has been an absolute blackout on me in Israel, an absolute blackout for the last 5 months, does not mean that I don't exist. And those people who are at my rallies, we have rallies, incredible, unbelievable, the numbers of people. And above all, the emotions, we give them hope. Because I say what they think. And when I get up and I say, Arabs out, and that's what you also think, that people just burst into applause. Of course this is so. And it's not an accident that most of my support comes from Sephardic Jews. They are normal. Normal people. Untouched by college professors. Normal people. They live in the real world. They've come from Arab countries, so they know what Arabs are. They don't sit as some Western Jew who says, Shevi Tamakus, let's sit with them over the coffee, cake, and work things out. That's not the way things are done in the Middle East. People there don't compromise on things that they believe in. The Arabs believe in this. Fully, sincerely. Give them credit. Don't have contempt for them. And Abba, even if he lives to be 121, will never grasp the Arab's mind. This refugee from Cambridge. But a Jew in a shchuna, he understands the Arabs. He comes from there, knows them, and when he gets up and he says, Arabi, Abim Shana, 40 years, and Arabs just don't believe him. That's what they all say. That's why my attack comes from that. They understand the Arab problem very, very well. hopefully, this year, we will get not only 8 seats, but 10 seats, perhaps more. And the main thing is that there will not be any government in Israel capable of being formed without the Kach movement this election. And we, unlike the other parties, the Orthodox parties, we're not interested in cabinet posts or in money. We have demands. And those demands, if not met, there will be no government. I'm a stubborn person. I'll sit home. We have various demands. And I'll just mention some of them now. Not all, because that has to be kept a surprise for Shani. First of all, we're going to demand that the Bitoch Lumi, the national insurance, which now is paid to Arabs, and we subsidize their babies, that the national insurance be transferred from the government to the Jewish agency. And at that point, insurance payments paid to Jews only and not to Arabs. That's the case. If you will not accept that, there will be no government. 2, a Jewish youngster in Israel serves 3 years in the army. Every year in Miluim, on reserve duty, we are now up to 62 days a year. 62 days a year. The Arab youngster laughs at us. He has no army, no Miluim. Laughs at us. Gets married at the age of 70, has a child a year, and a Jewish girlfriend on the side. Another tragedy. I get to hear from such people yelling about that. That certainly is against the halacha. I'm waiting for the first Jew, the Orthodox Jew in Knesset, to present some bill banning that. We are going to demand that an end be put to that. A demand. Every Arab, at the age of 18, 3 years of national service on the roads. And on reserve duty until we take power, then they're free, because then they're out. Our purpose is to make life difficult and intolerable for the Arabs so that they will leave themselves before I take power. If we will not accept that, there will be no government. 3, finally, we are going to show in 30 days how Who is a Jew could have been amended over the last 20 years. We are going to demand that within 30 days of this next government, Who is a Jew be amended to halacha, and if not, there will be no government. And if the other Orthodox parties would have done this years ago, it would have been law years ago. The reason why they don't do it and didn't do it is because they don't want to lose the money for their institution. And that is the reason. And everyone in Israel knows that. And that's why you will see how many of what they call the ultra will this election vote Kach. 4, a bill making proselytizing missionaries a felony, a crime, 5 years in prison. If that is not accepted, there will be no government. 5, an automatic death penalty to any terrorist caught without any judgment on the part of the Why should a terrorist be afraid today? They aren't afraid. The maximum that they get is life in prison. And they laugh at us. They make a V in the courtroom, and they say, will be free in 2 years in exchange of prisoners. I sat in Ramlet prison for 9 months, and I sat with terrorists because after all, Israel is a democracy. How good and how pleasant it is for terrorists to sit together. I sat with terrorists, and they laughed at us. There was one terrorist right next to my cell, an Israeli from Haifa, who had murdered 2 Jews. He planted a bomb in the shul, in the marketplace, in Haifa, and killed 2 Jews. He received a very, very severe sentence. He received 5 life sentences. Right? Not 4, 5. Almost 6. He laughed at us. He laughed at us. He once said to me, Shema Kehana, listening to me, he said, someday my friends will kidnap some of your soldiers, and I'll go free. 2.5 years ago, he went free when we freed 1,150 terrorists. And he went free. You, of course, know where he's living now. He's fair. He's from Haifa. That's right. That's where he is, in Haifa. He walks the streets daily in Haifa, where he murdered 2 Jews. You think that this is a normal country? We're going to demand an Arab is caught, a terrorist is caught. Terrorists are not soldiers. They have no rights. A person who comes over without a uniform to massacre men, women, and children has no rights. We will have them turned over to the Shabbat, Shin Bet, and do them whatever they want. All the information out of him, and then afterwards he'll be tried, found guilty, and killed. And if the New York Times is not happy, as this morning it wasn't happy with the awful death penalty against us, that's terrible. Too bad. One thing that I want every Jew here to do is first start becoming a religious Jew. It's not enough to be an Orthodox Jew. A religious Jew is someone who believes in the Kadosh Baruch Hu and believes that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is stronger than Ronald Reagan. How many Orthodox Jews really believe that? How many Orthodox Jews? I don't even talk about that. Not Orthodox Jews. Never. But how many Orthodox Jews every day will get up and daven and pray? How many really believe that if we do that which the Kadosh Baruch Hu wants, it doesn't matter what grade it is? Who really believes that? Everyone comes and says, but America won't give us money. First of all, how do you know America won't give us money? How do you know America won't give us money? Jews have, you can take the Jew out of the shtetl, but the shtetl stays inside the Jew. He thinks of America as some big brother. Without America, Israel can't survive. Instead of thinking that America doesn't back anybody except out of self-interest, he thinks that somehow they are doing us favors, and therefore we had best be careful what we say. America, if we threw out the Arabs tomorrow, and please God, if I'm the Prime Minister, that's exactly what will happen. The next day, America will be angry, of course. No question. America will condemn, protest, call in the ambassador, do all kinds of things. But that's where it will end. America doesn't back Israel because Israel is nice or a democracy. America backs Israel as all normal countries back any other country out of self-interest. American interest is a strong and a stable ally in the Middle East against the Soviets. Who does it have if not Israel? Abu Dhabi? Kuwait? Who? Who does it have? Has no one else except Israel. And when Schultz came to Israel and all the papers, and if you think that the news media here is bad, oh, see, Israel. paper saying, my God, if we say no, that's the end. Shamir said no. Schultz went home to Mr. Schultz. When Begin bombed the reactor in Baghdad, the world went crazy for a month. It was frightening. I couldn't sleep for a month. I was so terrified. And then a month passed. It was finished. And that's the way of the world. And Jews sit and say, but what will be? Don't worry. If we do that which he wants, he'll make sure that Reagan. Who is Reagan? Reagan is an instrument of the Kodesh Baruch Hu. He has no choice. He'll do what he wants, what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. This is Judaism. This is the basis of Judaism. Bitachon B'Shem, trust. The same Jew every morning davens. These may come with horses, chariots, but we have God. Doesn't believe a word. Doesn't believe a word of it. Some give it. Believe it. Believe it. And if you believe it, you'll also get horses and chariots from Monterey. This election is the most important election in Jewish history. And it will determine not only the physical fate of Israel, but also whether Israel will be a Jewish state or a Hebrew-speaking Sweden or Portugal or America. Probably the most difficult condition which we'll face, which we'll give, the most difficult one, will be our demand for a fundamental change in chinuch, education in Israel. The educational system in Israel in the secular schools is a disaster. It is a disaster today. The young Sabra comes out, doesn't know who he is, what he is, where he is, why he is. When you ask him if you ask him, who are you? What are you? He'll say, I'm an Israeli. He's not an Israeli, he's a Jew who lives in Eretz Israel. And that he doesn't know, because being Jewish to him has no relevance, not the slightest relevance. It doesn't mean anything to him. And a youngster in Israel who doesn't feel Jewish will eventually say, what am I doing here? Am I crazy? The army every single year, fighting, taxes, wars. I'll move to Los Angeles. The only reason why a Jew will stay inside Israel and suffer and sacrifice is if he knows that being Jewish is special. And living in a Jewish state is special. Then he'll stay. Then he'll sacrifice, of course. Chinuch, education must be Jewish. Every youngster from the age of 4 or 5 has to be instilled with Judaism and with Zionism. And why do Orthodox Jews run away from Zionism? What's wrong with it? Why do you let secular Jews take Zionism from us? We're the real Zionists. Do you think Herzl was the first Zionist? Herzl's grandfather was a Zionist when he davened 3 times daily and said, may our eyes behold thy return to Zion. Herzl stayed Jewish barely because of his grandfather and his great-grandfather, and so on. Right now I face it's almost from hell, except it isn't fun. An attempt to indict me for having written and handed out a little pamphlet which dealt with what was done in Israel to the Yemenite Jews and Sephardic Jews. And the charge is libelous. I'll pay them to have a trial. I'll pay them to have a trial. My fear is that they'll back away. Do you know what was done to the Sephardic Jews in Eretz Israel? Do you know the worst crime of the state of Israel? 800,000 Sephardic Jews came to Eretz Israel. They were the real Zionists. They didn't have to come. They didn't have to come. The Jews in Iraq, in Morocco, were friends. They came because when they heard in the not Israel there was a Jewish state, they rushed because they were real Zionists. The overwhelming majority, were observant Jews, religious Jews. You know what was done to them? Took Jews, religious Jews, in transit camps, in Mabarot. If you sent your child to a religious school, you didn't get a job. They didn't give you a job. You had to transfer your child to a Histadrut school and have the little paper stamp by the principal, and then you got the job. If you didn't join Histadrut, you did not get the job. Children were placed in kibbutzim and were destroyed as Jews. Yemenite children were brought, 10,000 of them, by youth Aliyah, without their parents, placed in kibbutzim, little children of 7, 8, 9, 10. Came, every Yemenite Jew was an observer Jew. Everyone was a Torah Jew. They came with their peyotes. Were put into kibbutzim of the land. Lost their peyot, lost their Shabbat, lost their, in 2 months, lost 3,000 years of Judaism. And I sat in prison with prisoners, the overwhelming majority of whom were Sephardic Jews. That's the great crime of Israel. Jews, Sephardic Jews who, when they were in the Galut, never knew what crime was. They never knew what crime was. How many Jewish murderers do you think were in Yemen? A Jewish murderer? A Jewish murderer? There was no such thing. I sat with them in prison. How many Jewish bank robbers were there in Morocco? Jewish bank robbers. There was no such concept. They destroyed them in Israel. They gave them the values of Dizengoff Street. And that has to be changed. There's going to be a Jewish state. The Attorney General of Israel wants a trial. He'll have a trial. Not I will be the one in the dock. But a state which destroyed 800,000 people. And we'll save them again. That's for sure. That's for sure. And let the Orthodox know the part that they had in this horror. Because in 1948 and 49 and 50, the religious Jews knew what was happening. Why did they go out into the streets? We're talking here about Shmat. Into the streets. Sit in the streets. Get arrested. Who did that? Who did that? What was the reason not to do that? In the world to come, there is a great shul, tremendous shul. Will be amazed who sits up front and who doesn't. It's time for us who always talk about, about tshuva, and Jews have to do tshuva. Every Jew has to do tshuva. Each of us has to look into ourselves and see what things we have to do tshuva about. This is the 40th year in which says a great deal about many, many things. Many, many things. I would hope that each and every one here will continue to think very, very seriously about living in Eretz Israel. Aliyah is what. If we would have another million Jews living in Yehuda Shomron, Gaza, the whole problem would be an academic question. The reason why they still talk about the occupied lands is because there are Bekoshi, barely 60,000 Jews living there. Of these 40,000 are Jews that live in the suburbs of Jerusalem and Fazal. We need Jews. Jews have to know that there is a mitzvah tasei to live in Eretz Israel. We have to do that. We have to go and stop fetching about the secular Jews there, from Shabbos and so on. If you want them not to, go there and vote them out of office. Teddy Kollek is mayor by one seat only. By one seat only, that's all. Another 10,000 votes, he would be mayor. So stop fetching. How easy it is to sit here and talk about Teddy Kollek and Harris. Go there and vote them out. And help me become prime minister. That's what it is. People say to me, but how can you get the Arabs out? How can I get the Arabs? The day that the Arabs put on their radios and hear that Khan is prime minister, half will be over the Almy Bridge within a day. Do you know what the name Kehunah means on the Arab? Do you know what it means to them? The fear. So when people tell me here, why don't you try and change the image a little bit, become a little more moderate? God forbid. I fought too long and too hard for this image. Arabs ever believe Ghana, that is really all right. He said, it's all over. It's all over. They only understand strength. They only understand fear. They understand me because I understand them. We understand each other perfectly. Neither of us understand Jews. They will go. They will go. They'll go by Egged bus. What's it? What do you? How would they do? What's the question over here? The Poles and the Czechs expelled 12 million Germans from their two countries. 12 million ethnic Germans in 1945 were expelled from Poland and Czechoslovakia. Sudetenland, Silesia, Danzig, 12 million Germans who have lived there for 1,000 years. How come Poles didn't ask for it? How do we do it in America? Stop telling Polish jokes. Start telling Jewish ones. What do you mean what, how, what, when will the world say? Who cares what they'll say? We have a problem. If they stay, we won't be there. So we throw them out, and they'll go. Will they go? Will they go? Of course they will go. And we'll stay. Please God, not ashamed. Our children will finally live safely in a country which is theirs. In a Jewish state, which is theirs, without fear, safely, proudly, and without guilt. Unbelievable Jewish guilt. That is the pernicious form of Jewish AIDS. Guilt. Nobody has honed guilt to a finer art than the Jews. Whether we did it or didn't do it, guilty about beating up Arabs. If you don't want to beat up Arabs, vote for me. They won't be here to beat up. Guilt, as if guilt that we have become brutalized. We have become brutalized. Jewish soldiers standing there under a rain of rocks, being cursed, being spat upon, brutalized. The problem is that the left in Israel is riddled with guilt. In their hearts, they don't believe that they have a right to be in Israel. In their hearts, they feel guilty about the fact that maybe the Arabs are really right. That's the leftist problem. God plays no part in their thinking. Judaism plays no part in their thinking. So why are they there? Because of history. The Jews once lived there. And in their hearts, they know that that's not enough of a reason. And so they think, maybe the Arabs are really right. So if you think that the Arabs are right, really, give up your kibbutz. Give up your kibbutz. Oh, no, not. They don't have the courage to act upon their guilt. And so they wallow deeper and deeper in this guilt, and they find that they have to take the Arab position on every single area. In order to win a crumb of forgiveness from the Arabs. It's a psychological problem, a deep psychological problem. Peace now has. It's not like over here 50 years ago in Vietnam. With Vietnam, right, wrong, it was 8,000 miles away. But if the left is wrong now, it's 15 miles from the sea. I have faith that there is a tremendous awakening today among Jews in Israel. And I have faith that this 40th year in Israel will mark a turning. Please God, there will be the kind of a state that we always dreamed of. A state of Jewish strength and Jewish power and Jewish soldiers. Not Hashem, when I come back next time, I hope it will be with a great more power to save the Jewish people, to do everything that's good for them.
We have this gentleman had his hand up. Hold the questions one moment.
Rabbi, we'll be pleased to take questions, and we will be pleased to answer all the questions. You can stay until you run out of questions. But there's one thing you have to understand. This man is personally giving of himself, one of the few voices that we hear, one of the strong voices that we hear. A man who's left his home, his grandchildren, his children. He's going to see 13 cities in 21 days. He's going through the United States. I met him at the airport. He said to me, I fear for the safety of Israel. I fear for the people of Israel. We all fear for the people of Israel. And we all do tzedakah in our way. But think about the fact, if you don't do now to save the state of Israel, what good will the tzedakah you do be? Charity, they say, begins at home. Well, begin your charity with the state of Israel. That's your home. That's your ultimate home. That's where, God forbid, one day, the only place that a Jew will be safe if America, the Golden Land, is not now safe. So I say, instead of giving to the yeshivas, elect a religious Jew to Parliament, to Knesset, and he will be sure the yeshivas will do what you want them to do. Instead of giving tzedakah, as you do for me, as chitim, as you give tzedakah to poor families, to collars, give to this man, give to the state of Israel, give to elect Mayor Kehonn. And there will be in Israel an economy that will support itself, where there will not be so many people who need relief. who need help. So I appeal to you, on behalf of Mayor Kehana, on behalf of the State of Israel, let your hearts open, let your pocketbooks open. Let me hear that you will donate, that you will make this man's trip to America worthwhile, that you will give to the State of Israel. Do I hear anyone who will say a contribution? Thank you very much. I have in my hands a check made to Cox International for $1,000. A check to the Jewish Overview for $1,000. Thank you very much. I have here cash of $450 made to Rabbi Kehana. A check to Cox International for $100. Anyone, please, I appeal to you. Mayor Kehana has sacrificed himself personally, has said what you only dared to think. Has himself sacrificed personally in every other way to save the Jewish people. If you know any alternative, if you know any reasonable alternative besides electing his candidates to office, this is the way to do it, with money. And the money will buy, in this most important election, it will buy beakers. It will buy poll watchers in an election where there's paper ballots. In an election where last time we would have had another seat in Knesset, were it not for the fact that ballots were stolen. We need poll watchers. We need to rent cars. We need people who will take people to the polls. The money will go to the election to elect, God willing, a large slate of candidates to Parliament. I have a check for $250 for the Jewish Overview. Is there anyone else? I appeal to you. Let me hear you. Open your pocketbooks. All right, thank you very much. There's an opportunity to buy books and literature outside. There's an opportunity to donate at a later time. Please keep in mind the importance of this cause. I have a check to Cox International for $100. Thank you very much. The Rabbi will be pleased to take questions. Thank you.
Rabbi Kehana, before the election in November, or about the same time, we'll be voting here in our own election.
Yes.
I noticed in your column, I think it was last week, referring to the front runner in the Democratic column, that many people supported him here in New York State without possibly realizing the point that you made in your column, that his wife is a Jew. And as Torah Jews, when we support somebody who is an example of an intermarriage, what are we really saying? I'd like to hear your comments or some clarity on that subject.
I can only say here what I wrote there, that the primary in this state, Democratic primary, showed it was a glaring example of the two tragedies that face American Jews. The two deaths that face American Jews. On the one end, there was Fort Jackson, a personification of a Jew hate, of anti-Semitism. And on the other hand, a candidate who is married to a Jewish woman. If he wins the election, it'll be the greatest boost for intermarriage ever. She will be invited to 100 luncheons of Hadassah in B'nai B'rith. And every Jew who had no other argument to his children except the odds on a good marriage, if it's an intermarriage, are not good. The child will come back and say, "What are you talking about? I may yet marry the president." I think it is an outrage that I certainly haven't heard one Jewish organization come out against him because of this issue. Maybe there were, but I didn't hear it. I haven't heard one rabbi come out against it. Maybe there were, but I didn't hear it. I think that for those two reasons, intermarriage and Jesse Jackson, you must punish the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the issue here, certainly on Jesse Jackson. That a Democratic Party allows an open Jew hater to run, and it gives him honor and money and support. If he would have been white, they would have withdrawn their support from him. If he would have been a Ku Klux Klaner, a Birch, they would have said, we wash our hands of this person. Instead, he is lionized, he is honored, he is glorified. Caucus shakes his hand, and Gore shakes his hand, and they will smile, and we say nothing. The Democrat, I'm not telling anybody here to vote for Bush. What I'm saying is to vote against the Democratic Party, punish them. And don't vote for any Democratic candidate on any level unless that person gets up and makes a public statement like Koch. Don't vote for Jesse Jackson. Then vote. Otherwise, don't. Punish the party. The blacks, if it would have been a white racist, the blacks would have been boycotting and marching and demonstrating, and the Jewish silence here is unbelievable and shameful and says so much about the tragedy of what has happened to us, not only as Jews, but as decent people. No self-respect. So, if in this election, if you're still here, I hope that you'll be there voting for me. If you're still here, if you're still cocky, I'm not telling you to vote for anyone. But certainly don't vote Democrat. Don't give money. Because they have contempt for Jews. They are convinced that they can do anything and Jews will always vote Democrat. Well, don't. Teach them a lesson on your way to Israel.
Excuse me, 1 minute. There's a silver sports car blocking the driveway, and someone can't get out. Can the person please move his car? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm very inspired to meet Rabbi Meir Kehana, an old friend of mine who has 35 years, right?
Correct.
I was a very close friend and still am, and a visitor to his home in Boston for many, many years.
This is a Jewish question.
I stand here with humility and trepidation and a prayer to Hashem Yisborach, because V'achaim v'hamoles v'yav hamoshu. I pray to Hashem Yisborach, Yeroshin shetishus k'nim b'maisi yodei, and divrei pi, whatever I say, be not chas v'sholem, in doubt, in derision, in contempt, but in love and affection for Meir Kehana, who's given his life, Mesiras Nefesh for Israel, and respect and love for Hashem Yisborach in the house of God. My question is this. Rabbi had to give my Rabbi Kehana was a rabbi and preached. I told him. And I like that way. For 45 years, and the Sorah. Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai and the Soul of Yeshua. And every generation we accept by Aminu B'Hashem of a Moshe Avdos. Without a Moshe, there's no Aminu B'Hashem. There has to be continuity. There has to be the sorrow. My question is this. I'm ready at this moment to write a check, give it to Rabbi Yitzchak Goodman Shlita, the Moral Ask of Young Israel. A check of $1,000. And the check will be made out to Kach International on one condition, that Rabbi Kehana
with the approval of the rabbi, the Mordas, but the Mordas who will choose 3 Gedolei Torah in America throughout the world. And Rabbi Kehana will go with me. If these 3 Gedolim will listen and they will paskin, pro or con, even if it's con against him, and my check stands. But I want to get the das of Gedolei Torah by Aminu Bashem of the Moshe Avdo. I want to hear the voice of Gedolei Torah, of Rosh Yeshivas, of Chachmei Yisrael, how they stand on this issue of Chaim Umoves for the Jewish people, for the Netzach Yisrael, for the future of Am Yisrael. $1,000 if he agrees, the rabbi chooses the Gedolei. The decision can be yes or no, and the money goes to Khan.
I think that the point raised was a vital point, a basic, which has to be answered. If you went to, the essential point was that he would give a check, if I agreed to go to 3 Gedolim chosen by Rabbi Goodman, it doesn't matter who, and accepted their psak on the things that I said. Pro or con, right. Now, you know very, very well that there is no such thing as Gedolim. There is your Gadol and his Gadol and a Gadol. I'm sorry. I was quiet because I'm not an extremist. I'm sorry. First, I said for the individual Jew there are no Gedolim. There is his particular Gadol. You don't go running around to read it. If a Chabad, for example, if all the Gedolim in the world said one thing, his Rebbe, the Babcha Rebbe, said another thing, he would only follow the Babcha Rebbe. He doesn't go to 3 Gedolim, he has his own Gadol. If the bells, it would be the same thing. Someone who follows Rebbe Bashar, he doesn't care what all the Gedolim said. That's his Gadol. I have a Gadol. The Sephardic chief rabbi is my Gadol. When I have a question, I go to him. Now write up a check.
I would like to say something that a lot of people here never heard before, and I think you should introduce this next time to your point. Your future will depend on the Sfarad, because they are the majority. Yes. And you speak like them, even though you don't know Arabic, you don't know the psyche of the Arabs. You talk exactly like somebody who was born and raised. That's right. I think the first thing you should do, you should change your name from Rabbi Kehana to Hacham Kehana. I will accept you then. The next thing is you should try, first of all, what you said. If there is a law in Morocco, if a Jew marries a Goyim Arab, 5 years in prison. How in Israel they allow such thing? And Dulim sit there doing nothing. There is a law, though, of a Jannah. I don't know if you know. Oh, yes. That you should modify. You don't throw any Arabs. You can tell them, like Rambam said, they live like we live in Arab countries, second-class citizens. They let us live our way. They supported our Torah. The king, may he live for 120. He's a good man. He allows the Jews to live their way. He pays the rabbis. The meeting is free. In fact, the laws of the Torah accepted as laws of the state. We don't throw anyone. But they have 22 countries. They wouldn't like it. Last year I was in Casablanca. I spent one night with 2 PLO members, believe it or not, in one hotel. They said to me, all our strength comes from the liberal Jews. The Jews who are not religious. They give them ideas of democracy. He said, the Jews conquer the land, it belongs to them.
When we conquer, it belongs to us. Those who wants to live there, live under it. You should not say through the Arab way. That's frightening a lot of people. Beside that, we have to return to hospitality. What? Hospitality. When Spain threw out Jews in 1492, the only two countries accepted Jews were Morocco and Turkey. However, they have to live under the Jewish law, be second-class citizens if they want to stay. If not, they go to, no. Throw away Arabs means like push them by force. And the next thing I would just add to the point is you should really study Arabic and a little bit of literature, at least in Hebrew or in English, and you should court or develop great friendship with Sephardim Hachamim, because there's still some respect for Torah by the Sephardim of the Hachamim. And there is a chance Sephardim have a tendency to believe in central power. They don't like each one his own rabbi, each one his own skill. They tend to have, through their history, to respect a central authority. If you gain, I heard Rabbi already use it many times, and he states, he has the same ideas as you. I know. You see, just if you get enough of them, then you'll be able to, from 60% after all, one man, one vote. In a few years, you really have a state that is governed by Torah.
Okay, I don't think that needs answers. I think that you made.
Second question.
I mean,
Answer that.
I think that you made several points which were, of course, valid. There's no question about it. And I certainly have said, and I've written many times, that the Arabs will be given that choice. It's a choice of halakha, that if Gil Toshav wants to do this, but don't fool yourself. The Arabs of Israel are not like the Jews in Morocco. There aren't 100 Arabs under the age of 40 who will ever accept it. Nevertheless, they'll be offered. Yes, we'll have everything ready for them to Yeah. Yes.
I'm very curious about the choice of an election in Israel. How much did the Labour Party spend in the last election? How much did Likud spend in the last election? And why is it that you stand here in front of an audience that applauds and applauds, and there's no hands in the pockets? It seems to me that there's more than $1 million spent for an election by the Likud, by the Labour.
A lot more.
A lot more?
It's expensive. In the last election, Labour spent $6 million just on election day. And election costs a lot of money. One of the major reasons is, at least in our case, that they steal votes in Israel. They steal votes in Israel. In Israel, voting is by paper ballot. It's the only advanced nation that has national elections with paper ballots. And the reason is obvious. It's easy to study. We lost our second seat in the last election by less than 4,000 votes. And I don't doubt it was stolen from us. What happens is, not only at the time of the counting, if you don't have your own poll watcher, at the time of the counting, they simply don't count the card vote. But worse than that, during the entire day of the vote, someone can walk into the polling place, pick up the paper ballots, mark the card, put them in his pocket, and walk out. Now there are no more card ballots there. Someone walks in, wants to vote card. He can't vote card. He certainly is not going to walk out and say, I want card ballot. So you have to have a poll watcher all day, from 7 in the morning until 10 in the evening, at 8,000 polling places. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Last election, we only had 400 poll watchers out of 8,000. So there were 7,600 polling places without top poll watchers. they rubbed us blind. We need a lot of money, and I really, hope that the people here will give us the money. I can't imagine people here not willing to write out a check, some kind of a minimal check, because it's so vital. This is it. This is the election.
Where would you send money by mail?
What?
Where would you send money by mail?
There are envelopes outside.
There are, I'm sure there are any paper,
Right outside.
any flyer or any paper that's out on that table has the address. Yes.
Well, could you name us and give a short list of the people who would win?
No. I can't yet. He was going to ask which people are going to be on the list for the test. No party has yet given out the names of its people.
I hope. Not what that good that is. That's how Chess came about.
No. There will be a convention of the COP 2 months with an election, and they'll be there. But you can be assured that the people nominated are the people that are COP people.
About smart.
Let me get this clear here now. I look forward to the day when we Jews will be able to talk about Jews and not what kind of a Jew. The fact of the matter is that it happens to be true that the majority of our list will be Sephardic Jews. But we have chosen them not because they're Sephardic, but because they're good Jews and they're good people. Not because they're Sephardic Jews. It happens to be true that 60% of the list will be Sephardic Jews. This is true. But it was not chosen on that basis. They were chosen for their own merit. Their own merit. Yeah.
How can you make sure that people will have a common ballot?
Well, every poll watcher has extra ballots in his pocket. And if there are none there, then under the law, he can stop the voting and insist that the ballots be placed. In other words, the poll watcher is really and truly the key to our victory. We have an opportunity now to get a lot more than 18, a lot more. I think that only God knows how many people are afraid to say the word Kehunah in Israel, but will quietly vote Kehunah. I think a lot of people are just terrified today of people can be fired from jobs if they're COP members. And we've had people fired from jobs. The Army won't take officers, people who have a COP background. It's an unbelievable thing. So people are afraid, but quietly they will vote COP. Yes?
How do you feel about the draft exemption in Israel for yeshiva students?
I believe that any yeshiva student who is a full-time student should not be drafted. And I have 2 sons in the Army, 2 sons-in-law in the Army. My son is a big Talmud Chacham, very, very big. But he serves. But if someone is a full-time student, but I mean a full-time student, not playing games, as a lot of them do, then a full-time student, we need Torah scholars. But if there's someone who has time to also work part of the day, then he's got time to serve in the Army too. And he will serve in the Army. We're going to make the yeshivas honest. If you sit and learn all day, you will sit and learn. If not, nothing wrong with your putting aside a couple of weeks a year to serve Israel, the Jewish state. There's nothing wrong with that. But I certainly believe that someone who is a full-time scholar, but full-time, nothing else, should not be drafted. Yes?
I originally had 2 questions I wanted to ask, but the fellow in the front row mentioned part of my other question, and I'd really like to make that an addendum to the question that I wrote. A lot of the points that you had made, I think a lot of people agree with. Even people who won't come outward and say that they agree with, actually do agree with. Looking on into the future, let's say your party grows to the point you are able to become the prime minister. I think something that sits in everybody's mind is, even though we agree with, if not all of what you say, at least a good portion of it, I think a lot of people might have the feeling, and I do myself, that as prime minister, you might lack somewhat of the polish that is necessary. I'm not saying that's the correct way. We know that to be a politician, you have to be somewhat two-faced, even though we as Jewish people don't believe that's the total way to go about it. However, we're not living in a total world. And as a future prime minister, it will require that certain amount of whatever you want to call it. The additional point that I'd like to make is similar to what the man in the first row had said. Even though I believe that probably the smartest solution at this point might be, or probably is, to throw out the Arabs. However, even as you go on campaigning, for not to appear that tough, even though I'm not disagreeing with the points, but that tough image, so that the point is, Arabs are welcome to stay. They're very welcome to stay under our Jewish law, not the Jewish law that's here. Even though you said that as an answer to his question, I think it should be made more emphasis during the whole time that you had spoke. Nothing was said. The country will be by Jewish law, by Torah law. They're welcome to either stay and fit into it or leave.
All right. On the first point, I think it's about time that Jews stopped adapting to what you call the real world. Let me just tell you something. A story about the Ger Rebbe, first Ger Rebbe, who was studying with his little son, who at that time was only 5. They were already learning Gemara in Warsaw, in Warsaw. And they came to Gemara, Kuli Alma. So the father asked the son, who is the Kuli Alma? Tell me, who is the Kuli Alma? Who is the Kol HaOlam? He didn't know. He said, come here. He took him to the window. He said, look out the window. There was this Warsaw street filled with thousands of people. And he said to him, you think that is the Kuli Alma? We are the Kuli Alma. Don't tell me to adapt to the world. The world will adapt to me. I am not going to be polished if polish is a euphemism for don't always tell the truth and don't always do this.
I didn't mean don't want to tell the truth.
Yeah, but
you will have to speak with other leaders of the world.
Right, and I will speak with them exactly the way I speak to you. Or else, don't vote for me, because you don't need one more of the 119 losers that are sitting in the Knesset now. The second point is about certainly in my books, in every one of my books, I have stated clearly the choice that will be given the Arab. And the choice is clear. I spoke to you about what I'm convinced will be. The Arabs will not accept that. The Arab has self-respect. He doesn't want to live as a non-citizen. He doesn't want that. And if he's convinced that time is on his side, which he is, and if he's convinced that the liberal Jew is on his side, and he is, he certainly won't accept this. Nevertheless, he will be offered, no question about it. Not because I have any hopes of it, but because that is halakha, and I have to give him the choice of halakha. I have to give it to him. If you want to stay here quietly, sit still, shop. But if not, leave. He will not accept this choice of sitting quietly. I don't say all. Certainly the older ones will. The older ones will. The older ones will. But among the young ones, a mere handful will. The overwhelming majority will not. So I'm talking about, I don't want to give you the illusion. We'll give them a choice so that you might think, well, maybe half of them will choose it. They won't. I want to be open with you and tell you the honest truth, what to expect. They will not willingly leave unless they're forced. And then they'll leave. But only if they're convinced that Kehana eats little babies for breakfast. If I ever had a good image, it's finished. Finished. I want them to be afraid of me, to be terrified. Not why? Because in that way, less Arabs and less Jews will be killed. Yeah.
I'd like to say,
I'm gonna move from here to there to there, etc.
Many of us are concerned with your safety. I notice you come here without, I think, sufficient protection. And what about a successor? If someone...
I'm not going in.
We hope so.
It's a very good question.
I mean, I'm sure that some of these fanatics will try to kill you eventually.
We're pretty sure that in America, at least now, there is no great danger. The danger is inside Israel. And it's not from Arabs, it's from Jews. It's not from Arabs. The police always tell me at rallies, watch yourself. And they're always talking about the Jews. In Israel, I don't go anywhere without bodyguards. I mean, good ones. People who know the score. Nevertheless, you're right. It's not possible. I speak at 2 rallies a night. These are all open-air rallies. I'm on a platform. It's wide open. There's no way to really stop. If someone is that crazy and is not afraid of being caught, it's not possible. I mean, it's not possible to stop. Nevertheless, we do what is maximally possible. The police, I must say, are really with us. I mean, they also do a fine job. They are really with us. So we do the most that is humanly possible. We'll see. What?
Why do you get sick?
We have people. We certainly have people. Just as the average person could not have named the number 2 person to Menachem Begin. Nobody in America really knew who was the number 2 person to Begin. Inside Israel, nobody voted Likud. They all voted Begin. Actually, Begin left. And there was someone else to take this, but no one is indispensable. Nobody. No, so don't worry about that. Now let's say this side here.
I was...
I'm sorry, it was first. Yes. No. Speak up. He has 3 questions.
Kennt doch nicht sein wie Demokratie. Die Verwurzeln in Israel, also ich viel Demokratie. Das ist das erste meine Frage. Die zweite Frage. In Israel ist 1,5 Millionen Araber. Was wird denn mit dem so? Eben Arroistreiben kennen doch. Du fliegst. Und wo sie haben zu viel Kinder machen sie. Mit der Das ist die zweite Frage. Gut? Und die dritte Frage ist, dass mir deine Zunge in Israel ist eine Sache.
Ja.
Und die Psychologie und der russische Juden, das ist Eierpsychologie.
Ja, noch genau.
Ja. Ist Health with Wissen. gegen von uns helfen.
I'm going to just translate the questions and then the first question was if the Arabs want to hurt us, kill us, why democracy? Why there is too much democracy inside you know, the second question was, it's not possible to move the Arabs out. And if they stay, it'll be, bad. Too many Arabs. What can one do? The third question was, do the Russian Jews who think as I do they back me in Israel? How Efshel All right. The answer is, I'm going to answer him later, obviously, later, privately. But just quickly, first of all, the Russian Jews do back me a tremendous amount of backing. The answer to his second question, I would answer to you, we're going to throw them out. And too much democracy, yes. Right. We're back here.
The first time I was in Israel, I visited the Museum of Potential Holocaust in Paaراکوی, and I see that you hardly ever plug that place for her. I mean, you did start it, but that wasn't my question. My question is, what advice do you give to a child of parents who wants to make Aliyah, but his parents think that he or she is running away from them, and they can't accept the fact that the child has a need to go to Israel?
Well, certainly, look, I think it's not any different than in many cases where there are parents whose children have suddenly become ruined and who want to be Orthodox Jews. And the parents look upon this as somehow being an insult to them. Up until now, you ate in my home, and now you eat in the home. Suddenly, and they feel that somehow this is a personal insult to them, and a revolt against them. To live in Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah. And in order to do that mitzvah, that takes precedence even over honoring parents. Obviously, the child has to sit with the parents and explain carefully that God forbid it's not running away from you. On the contrary, come with me. Come with me. Come with me. I'll pay. You pay my fee. Come with me. Come with me. We'll all live together.
How does it take precedence over keeping on there?
Because any mitzvah which parents don't want the child to that takes precedence over honoring parents. If your parents will tell you not to be shopping. Question about that?
Isn't Kibbutz Abba one of the Ten Commandments and don't?
You're right. But in the Torah it says that one should honor his parents, but keep the Sabbath. And from that, the rabbis learn that since the parents are also obligated to honor God by keeping Sabbath, therefore they can't tell someone, they're a child, not to keep that mitzvah because they also should keep that mitzvah. Therefore, it takes precedence over parents. That's
This week's Sandra, Rashi, Kadosh.
Anyways, but that's it's fun. Obviously, even when one doesn't do what parents want, it should be done. It should be done with respect. Sit down with your parents and say, I love you. I want you to live with me in Eretz Yisrael. Come with me. I'm not running away from you. I want to take you with me to do the right thing. If they agree, fine. If not, you've done what you have to do. You have to do that. We're back to the Yeah.
I'd like to say,
Louder.
I'd like to say I think it's important to support you because I believe my father's a Warsaw ghetto survivor, and he had to do what was necessary at the time when that horrible incident took place. I believe if he supported you, would do the right thing in protecting Israel because of all the games that goes on in politics. And I believe that you would be a strong supporter and never have a thing that happened like that again. The way the Germans made the Jews believe that they were going to do them good when they led them to their death.
Let's take one more round here, and then we'll have to... Yes.
I've been a college student for a little over a year, and I'm very confused about Israel and about the Arab-Israeli conflict. I have two very quick and what I would consider pertinent questions. Pertinent questions. One is religiously, I've heard both Hasidim and Misnagin talk about something called in the Gemara tractate Ketubah, where it specifically states that a Jew should not go back to Israel until after the Messianic, when the Messiah comes. That's one question. The other one was I was listening to a program on the radio. They had a representative of the PLO, and someone called up and said, if it's true that, you know, he mentioned that, you know, he in fact mentioned Jew. He said about the Sephardim team. If there's nothing to threat, then how come a large percentage of Sephardim team are supporting